Now we're joined by youth activist Simthandile Nteyi and entrepreneur Amahle-Imvelo, Jaxa, to discuss some of these experiences that the youth are facing today. So Simthandile, let me start with you. In fact, a question that we will pose to both of you. Today we are marking June 16, 1976, 44 years ago, and we talk about the bravery of these young people of 1976 and how they answered to the call of history at the moment that that call came through. Just looking back and thinking about those events and the role that they played in shaping our history, how much strength and inspiration do you still draw from the events of June 16, 1976?
Okay, thank you for the question. I draw a lot of inspiration and strength from that because for me, students simply just standing up for injustices, saying enough is enough, we deserve better, just shows how much strength and courage that it took. And for instance, considering the many factors and crises that we are facing in our country, just seeing the strength that they had motivates me to have the strength to fight for more of the injustices that we have to endure.
Yeah, and just speaking of fighting for more, Amahle, then I'd like to bring you in and just ask you if you think that young people of today, 2020 that is, do you think they are fighting, to preserve that legacy of the youth of June 16? Do you think they do have a struggle that they are fighting against?
Yes, I think the struggle that we face now is more an economical struggle as opposed to one of racial injustice, etc. I think when you look at unemployment in South Africa, you can see that most people are living below the standard that they should be living under. So as much as our fight is not racial as it was back in the day, and economic oppression still exists in South Africa, and I think that is one fight that the youth is currently trying to tackle.
All right, ladies, one of you has some sound going on in the background that's sort of interfering, so if you can ask someone to sort it out on your side, that would help a great deal. But as we talk, Amahle, we're facing a situation where uncertainty has really crept in, particularly in as far as the education sector is concerned. And we all know how important education was in that struggle in 1976 and how it has been for many, many generations after that. One thinks, for example, the fees must fall activists of the last few years and the subsequent struggles around, Black Lives Matter as well as roads must fall. As you look at the disruption that has been brought on by COVID-19 to the education sector, but also coming off the back of an education system that was already tricky in as far as meeting its mandate to young people, what are your reflections? What do young people need to do to pick up the mantle of a quality education for all young South Africans?
I think it starts with us basically getting with the times as the global times are doing, getting into teaching people with other systems other than being in a classroom, because we've seen that South Africans have been delayed in giving the adequate education spaces. So to get ahead with it, I think the best solution is to try and find solutions with network companies, with tech companies, to try and evolve and make us more fourth industrial, so that we can cut the curb of people that are being uneducated, because we've seen that the buildings are still not built, the toilets are still not there. So I think a solution now is for us not to try, when we try and rectify, is to try and look to the future to educate us instead of trying to now fix what's already been broken, which is the toilets and stuff. Let's now move with the world in the way we should educate.
Yeah, and I suppose that's where we see the similarities, right? When it comes to the youth of 76 who were fighting against Bantu education, and now we're seeing in 2020 where young people are saying, hey, we still want free quality education, we still want access to education. Hence we've seen some of those trending hashtags on social media where young people are saying we've been deregistered, we have no idea why, we have no access to devices and to to data. I mean, Simthandile, it took lives being lost back in 1976 to get to where we are, just in terms of education. What would it then take for the youth of 2020 to access what their demands are when it comes to quality, free education, do you think?
Well, referring to what Amahle said, I think it's definitely trying to raise awareness about what it is that is happening so that people are aware that there are many people who aren't as advantaged as others, and just trying to bring businesses on board to try and provide for the students that aren't getting access and adequate equipment for their education. And the COVID-19 pandemic has really put a hold on everything, and truly it is quite sad that yes, online learning and learning is still resuming, but however there are still students who are not having access to these platforms and these devices, and they are being disadvantaged. So I think many strategies need to be formulated and considerations need to be made of those students who are not accessing the school programs and are missing out on the examinations that are being written. So I just think there needs to be a consideration of those people who are not accessing all of this, and we just need to form strategies in order to make sure that we are all equally equipped and we are all accessing what it is that we need for school.
And Simthandile, if I stick with you for a moment, I mean, I was listening to a radio broadcast this morning that was describing your generation of young people as the unfortunate generation, in that, I mean, you're dealing with an economic crisis, global economic crisis, for the second time in a matter of just about a decade or so. But at the same time, we're dealing with a pandemic at the moment around the world, but also more, directly to us in South Africa, issues to do with violence meted out against women by men in our society. I don't know where you stand, Simthandile. I mean, I'm out of words to analyze what is happening. I'm out of words to condemn what is happening. I'm campaigned out. I'm angry. And I feel powerless a lot of the times, because it feels like no matter how many times you say this must stop, we've hit a brick wall. What do we do to sort of get some traction, to get some political will coupled with societal will that actually begins to show that there's more of the forces of good than the forces of evil out there, particularly on issues of violence meted out by men against women in our society?
Well, I think the issue of gender-based violence is something that's very tragic. I mean, it's instilled a lot of fear for women, especially we feel so unsafe, and a simple act of just going to the store or going to school, you are constantly looking over your shoulder and you're scared. What if I am next? Because the statistics show that every 36 seconds a woman is raped in South Africa, and every 3 hours a woman is killed in South Africa. So it has instilled a lot of fear within women. But I think what it is that can be done is that people need to start introspecting themselves, introspecting the circles that they surround themselves with, in order to see and try and eradicate the rape culture that is prevalent, and try and educate people on the struggles of women and the fears that we have. Yes, we are still very much far from where it is that we'd like to be, which is a country that is free from gender-based violence. However, we need to keep talking about it. We need to keep fighting. We need to keep teaching ourselves and try and unlearn certain things that people have normalized and how they affect women. So I think how we can just keep moving is that you can't lose hope. You can't just sit back, because it's still happening. People are dying. You need to have your input. So keep speaking about it, keep introspecting, keep calling out people, and just try by all means to condemn it. And we truly just need strategies, and we need agendas that need to be enforced in order to pressure people who are in power, people who are in elite positions, to enforce and integrate laws that can protect women and children in our country, because truly we are living in times that are unsafe, and there's a lot of uncertainty. So, yeah.
And I mean, speaking of that, we've seen women constantly saying that not only do they feel unsafe from the hands of, their loved ones, be it your husband, your boyfriend, your brother, your uncle, they still don't feel enough protection from the law or law authorities or even government. They feel legislature and policy is failing them. They feel that, even the police is failing them. Once you report sort of like a crime or you report an incident that happened to you, you're either turned away or victim shamed. And Amahle, I want to ask you, as a young woman living in South Africa right now, do you feel safe in 2020? Do you feel, comfortable when your sister, your mother, your friend, your daughter, your cousin who's a female says, going out for a couple of hours, I will be back? Do you feel safe or rather confident that they will return home safe in this day and age that we live in?
Not at all. I do not feel an ounce of safety, to a point where I think, for me and my friends, we've gotten this app and we follow each other to make sure that we're always safe. But there's no feeling of safety. I watched a video this morning of a lady who had called the cops on her brother, and she was pregnant. And the cop looked at her and said, "What must I do?" And he was dressed in a SAPS uniform and everything. So when you see images like that on social media and you actually experience it when you go into a police station, you have no hope. Every time you walk out of your house, it's a risk. And unfortunately, it's a risk that I have to take because I have to be employed. I have to employ other people. So as a woman in South Africa right now, I'm at the bottom of the food chain. I'm currently fighting 3 pandemics, one being COVID, the next one being Black Lives Matter, and then the last one being femicide. And so as a woman, there is no safety at all for us in South Africa.
Sure. And ladies, if we can stick with this theme for just a moment, then there's also this aspect of a culture of entitlement to women's bodies that exists among men. It even comes through in the way that we as men refer to women, even in expressing our outrage about issues to do with violence against women in our society. And I choose to call it that because, to say gender-based violence to me feels like sanitizing it, that it's violence meted out by men against women in our society. And in many instances, even in trying to be role players in that struggle, there are phrases we use, our women, stop abusing our women, and also stop abusing our sisters, our sisters, our mothers, etc., as if to say women must not be abused simply because of how they relate to us as men as a frame of reference. So where am I going with this? What is your message to South African men who are the instrument of this violence against women in our society? Let me start with you, Simthandile.
My message would be, like I said, introspection. We need to dismantle the patriarchy and the patriarchy that is exercised by men, because truly it has a long-term effect on women, as you can see by the statistics of women dying and being raped. So truly we need to start introspecting, just as we fought for Black Lives Matter, just as we fought for justice for George Floyd and many other people who've lost their lives to police brutality. We need to fight for women who've lost their lives to gender-based violence. We cannot tolerate, we cannot just sit back and watch as people are dying. Like they say, we will not allow the killing of our women, yet they are silent when gender-based violence is arising again. And therefore, start introspecting, educate your friends, educate yourself on rape culture and how it is perpetuated and how it affects women, in order for you to not become a part of the problem. Educate yourself, fight with us, because truly women are tired of fighting. We've been fighting for Black Lives Matter. We're fighting 3 pandemics, in fact, COVID-19, Black Lives, systematic oppression, as well as femicide. So we feel as though there was no one that's fighting for us. So we truly ask that educate yourself on the struggles that women face. Try and eliminate rape culture and just try and protect us. That is all that we ask. Do better. As they always say, men should do better.
Sure. Amahle, on the same question?
I think for me, we also just need to be cognizant of the language and the tones that we use. Women do not rape themselves. It is not a woman's responsibility to make sure that she is not raped. I think men need to be in this conversation. It is how many men have raped women, how many men have violated, etc. And then another thing I think is important is that the law needs to change, because until men realize the consequences and those consequences become fruitful, I think we're going to keep having these waves of femicide where it's got a lot of eyes on it, and then it kind of disappears. That time, women are still dying and women are still being abused. So I think a change in law, whether that be a higher sentence for raping, or maybe sorting out our justice system to get rape cases processed faster, so women also do not have to live with these perpetrators on the streets, etc. But I think we've protested enough, we've streamed enough, we've done it all. It's no longer up to women, it's up to men, and I think it starts at the top. And it starts with government actually acknowledging that it's not a woman's problem and that it's a man's problem, and then it filtering down into all the other systems and into all the other institutions in South Africa, and that goes into business, how women are treated in the boardroom. Stop trying to make us make tea and go fetch notes, because that also kind of fosters this idea that women are beneath you and that they don't deserve your respect or to command rooms as men do. So I think it's a whole problem in the whole system of life in itself. And for me, it starts with the president actually acknowledging that this is a man's problem and not a woman's problem.
Now, ladies, earlier on, you also mentioned that there are 3 pandemics that are going on right now. There's COVID-19, there is, racism through Black Lives Matter that we're seeing, but also there is femicide, that's currently being experienced in South Africa. I want to come to, racism for a moment and just the issue on Black Lives Matter, because the truth of the matter is when we go back to history and we look at today, in 1976, it was black young people that were protesting. It was black young people that were fighting against Bantu education at that time. Also, it was black young people that were shot, and through Hector Peterson, we've seen the likes being killed for fighting for what was their human right, which is a basic human right to education. And Amahle, I just want to start with you and just ask, you are already an entrepreneur and a CEO, and you've already just alluded to some of the challenges you face as a young woman. Being a young black woman in South Africa, do you think that we have reached a point where we are a non-racial country? And I'll ask you this because our reporter Masego Ratlaga was having a conversation with Musima Mani earlier on, and he said that he's working towards a non-racial South Africa. Do you think we've reached that point? Is South Africa still very much under a racial system that works against the black child?
Yes, definitely. As an entrepreneur who is a black person and a woman, it works against me in the sense that when I have tried to apply for loans for my business, I have struggled and still have not gotten them. And I can assure you that my white counterparts have probably gotten loans. So it might not be as obvious, the racism. I might not walk down the street and get slurs, but it is systematic in the sense that it's more difficult for me to get loans. I am more undermined in boardrooms because I am assumed to be someone's PA or secretary or something of those sorts. So the racism is still very much prevalent in our society, and I think it goes back down to the fact that South Africa just kind of swept over apartheid and didn't actually teach and instill, even in schools, the gravity of what apartheid is and how it still affects us socially, economically, in all spheres of life. When I remember I studied history in high school, and the apartheid chapter was this big, but the World War chapter was this big. So I think it boils down to educating both white and black people about racism, and I don't think South Africa has done that sufficiently enough, and that's why to this day we still see black South Africans being denied home loans when they have better credit scores than their white counterparts.
And Simthandile, if you come in on the same theme around issues to do with race relations and how they relate to justice, and the whole theme of Black Lives Matter, the need to emphasize that, doesn't detract from all lives matter, does it? It simply says Black Lives Matter as a fact that stands on its own and being asserted because of the objective lived reality. That's my suggestion to you. Do you agree with that suggestion?
I truly agree. We're not saying that all lives do not matter. We're just saying that Black lives are treated as if they don't matter, and they are currently an endangered species. So we need to focus our attention and our efforts into making sure that our lives do matter and that they're not taken simply for the color of our skin because we are a darker pigment. And truly, racism is still very much prevalent in South Africa. As I said, it's very systematic, as she noted. It entrenched in our economy, and as well as the education system being denied opportunities. And like I said, we need to, as she said, well, in fact, it was very swept over, and we need to deal with it because it still very much affects Black people in various systems of society. Therefore, we need to address the issue of racism and systematic oppression and how it's still very much prevalent. And yeah, basically.
Yeah, we're going to wrap it up now, ladies. But before we do, just on that matter, I just want to get closing remarks on you, particularly on this, topic of Black Lives Matter and racism. How do you then suggest, and I'll start off with Amahle, we do this? We're seeing examples coming from, the likes of, our U.S. counterparts through the Black Lives Matter. I mean, there are daily protests. They take over the different states in the U.S. But not only that, but they're also challenging legislature. They're governing and also just campaigning around one another to go and vote. Everyone else wants to see law enforcement agencies taking more accountability for their actions, and they want, the law also to protect Black lives in the United States. But when it comes to a more South African context, what would then your message be to those who do hold the power to change these policies, those who are part of our law enforcement, and here I'm talking about the SAPS definitely, but also our government officials who are our representatives. What would you like to see? Starting with you, Amahle.
I think for me, I think freedom comes obviously from when you have the freedom to do things, but also economic freedom is the most important. So I think opening up the economy to people like myself by giving us easier ways to secure loans so that I can then go on and employ more people, I think is the first step in the right direction. And then secondly, change the way we educate young people in South Africa and make it known that apartheid was something that was wrong and it still affects us today. Make white people understand that their past transgressions still affect us today and that we cannot move on. I'm not sure on how to do that exactly using policy, but I'm sure that if we were to actively try and educate both white and Black people on the transgressions that Black people experience and are still experiencing today, that we would probably have a better chance of eradicating racism in South Africa.
Thanks so much. Simthandile, yourself?
I would say, firstly, acknowledging the injustices and systematic oppression that is very much prevalent, not turning a blind eye to it. And truly, like she said, opening up the economy, allowing more opportunity for Black people to succeed in our economy, such as sectors like the corporate world or the business sector, truly granting them opportunity and opening the economy more, I would say.
All right, ladies, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time this morning, and that was really edifying. That's Amahle-Imvelo Jaxa, who is an entrepreneur, as well as Simthandile Nteyi, who is a young activist and feminist. Edifying, intellectually stimulating, and I really loved it. I enjoyed
that, but also it's good to just talk to young people, because I think most times they feel they're being talked at and talked over,
always,
but nobody engages them. And we're talking about population that is more in South Africa, just in terms of that voting power as well. So it's good to hear from them. We shouldn't hear from them only on June 16.
Absolutely,
it should be a daily
you are there.
engagement.